What's up, YouTubers? So before we get started with this video, on First Take, they're going to be talking about which duo would be harder for Doc Rivers to coach, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, or Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So let's see what they have to say about that.
Which is the tougher duo to coach? Do you think it's PG-13 and Kawhi, or would you go Embiid and Simmons for Doc?
Embiid and Simmons.
To me, it's Kawhi and PG. It's a tougher situation because of where they are in their careers. If you are Kawhi Leonard, you're a two-time champion and a two-time NBA Finals MVP. More importantly, you're a bit indifferent as a personality. You're very businesslike in your approach. You go out doing what you need to do as it pertains to doing your job. But in terms of galvanizing the troops around you, that's not who Kawhi Leonard is. You search around, you talk around NBA circles, that's what you consistently hear. In the case of Paul George, obviously Paul George is one of the more talented, two-way players in the NBA. He's a star, but unfortunately in his postseason career, particularly this postseason, that was not the case. And if you're
Yeah, because he choked. He choked big time.
Doc Rivers and you walked into that situation, you got guys that are veterans, they're established stars, they're set in their ways, they believe there's a certain way to do things and what have you, and as a result, it ended up being an incredible challenge, particularly when you consider what Doc Rivers had to absorb once Kawhi Leonard arrived. Kawhi Leonard wants Paul George. Kawhi Leonard forces the Clippers to trade the farm in order to acquire Paul George because that's the person that he wanted to play with. He was going to practice when he felt necessary. He was going to take games off in terms of game, load management when he wanted to. He was going to play when he wanted to during the regular season, of course, always available during the playoffs. But all of these things assist to what makes life difficult for a coach, particularly when you have an ownership making these kind of investments. That's problematic. In the case of Philadelphia, yes, Embiid and Ben Simmons are young. All right. And you got to get Ben Simmons to shoot the ball. He only attempted 7 3-pointers the entire season last year. Joel Embiid attempted 172. So one guy needs to get in the post more and stop having his big backside on the perimeter. And the other guy needs to develop a perimeter shot so he can be much more of a formidable threat. But they're both incredibly young. They both got a lot of promise and a lot of future ahead of them, and they're able, they're trainable to some degree, as opposed to being definitively set in their ways because they don't have any definitive set ways that has really, really worked for them. And I think that's the difference. That's why I say it's tougher to coach Kawhi Leonard and Paul George at this stage, particularly for Doc Rivers and what he had to deal with last year with the Clippers, than it would be for him to coach Embiid and Ben Simmons.
So I'm going to have to disagree with Stephen A. Smith on this one. I think it'll be more harder to coach Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid because people say that they're young, but they're not that young. So Joel Embiid's in his, 6th or 7th year? That's veteran status right there. And if you look at Ben Simmons is creeping up on his, I think this is his 4th year. So he's right on the cusp of being a veteran too. So they're closer to being a veteran than they are being a rookie. And it's time for them to start, playing like a professional, going hard every night, and doing everything that you're supposed to do to be able to win a championship. So it's not like they're so young that they have playoff experience. They made a deep run in the playoffs. That's why I was kind of mad when Jimmy Butler left the 76ers because I thought he was a good leader for them that they can feed off of, like he's doing in Miami at this point in time. But like I said, I think Joel Embiid is a little bit too immature and kind of childish, and that's going to be very hard to get rid of when a person's like that. With all the antics and everything he does when he's on the court, with waving his hands and doing all that type of stuff, I just think that's going to be hard to coach. And Ben Simmons, supposedly he worked on his shot this summer, and he still looked like trash coming out. So I think that's going to be harder to coach than it would be Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, who are professionals. One guy has been to championships, won MVPs, won rings, and all that. So he knows how to win. He's a well-seasoned veteran that can make adjustments to a new coach, a new situation, a new whatever. I think they'll be easier to coach than an immature immature and childish Joel Embiid, and a Ben Simmons that can't shoot for anything.
Well, let me just say this, because you covered a lot there. He had 1 year with Kawhi and Paul George. Doc did. 1 year. And in that one season, which is a weird bubble season, yes, everyone had to deal with it, but it was still like a strange season. It was considered an utter disaster that they got to game 7 of the second round, right? So I don't know what would have happened going forward. I suspect they would have gotten better than they were this year, and they were damn good this year. He is now going to a situation where, yes, he has a point guard and a center. Yes, he has 2 amazing talents. I mean, Ben Simmons is, I thought, the best defender in basketball this year when he was healthy. But he's kind of like a poor man's LeBron James with a better handles, but with no shot at all, right? And Embiid should be the best big man in the game. So he has a lot to work with there. But there's one huge difference. Kawhi and Paul George wanted to play together. In fact, Kawhi wasn't going to sign if they didn't trade for Paul George. It was a condition of his signing with the team. So when 2 guys want to play together, you're starting from a different point, even if their skills aren't perfectly complementary. Ben Simmons and Embiid never asked to play together. They got drafted into this situation. They were born into this situation. They both view it as their team. I'm sure they both want their own team. Ben Simmons, because he can't shoot, is put in the dunker spot in the playoffs, becomes a forward in the playoffs. Embiid, because he can, sometimes is used to stretch the floor, even though that's not always the way he should be used, and he doesn't quite shoot it well enough. And yet, if you put Embiid where he should be, does that slow up Simmons? So even though they play well together, like their team is really, really good when they're on the floor together, the fact of the matter is not only is it not a perfect fit, but the big point for me, Isaiah, is they didn't ask for it. It doesn't seem to me that they want to be playing together, and Kawhi and Paul George did.
So I don't know if that factors into a lot of what's going on in Philadelphia and Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. That's where it goes along with being mature and not acting childish to work with somebody that you may not want to work with. Of course, they were drafted with the team and, everything that goes along with that. So like I said, they didn't ask to be there. But at this point in time, they were veterans, especially Joel Embiid. Like I said, he's in his 6th or 7th year. I think he was drafted in like 2014. So he knows the ropes. He knows what's going on. Again, I know he didn't play his first 2 years, but he's still there in the NBA system, and he sees how guys should be working. He was there with Jimmy Butler. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were both there with Jimmy Butler, and they saw how he worked and the things that he did, and they can see now that how much is paid off because he's in the finals right now, down 2-1 to the Lakers. So, again, I think it'll just be kind of hard to work with Joel Embiid, who's kind of immature and childish. If he's still like that at this point in time, that could be a problem. That could be hard to coach out of him. And Ben Simmons, like I said, he's supposed to work this summer on his shot. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if he's next couple of years, if he's not balling out, he might be, not what everybody thought he would be. So, but again, with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, those guys are well-seasoned veterans. One of them has won, everything you can think of, and he's just a professional. A professional. He's quiet. He takes care of business. You don't see him pouting. You don't see him doing all these crazy antics on the court and dancing around, all this type of stuff. Get in there, take care of business, get the win, and get out. And that's how Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are for the most part. So let's continue.
Max, Stephen A., both of you make excellent points. And Max, this isn't a brother thing, but I'm going to have to side with Stephen A. on this one, not because it's his show and he's got the power and all that. I look at, from a coaching standpoint, I put on my coaching hat, and I look at George and I look at Kawhi. Both of them measure themselves by how many points they score, and they are measured by the general public by how many points they're scoring. So there's internal pressure within the team when you bring 2 scorers to a team that have never played together. And from a practice standpoint, they don't get much practice time together. And then from a physical conditioning standpoint, we all know the Clippers were not in great physical shape.
No, so Isaiah Thomas, I don't really want to hear that because when Kawhi Leonard did his 1 year with the Toronto Raptors and he won it all, he never played with those guys before. He didn't have another superstar that was on his level with the Toronto Raptors. I know Pascal Siakam really stepped it up and Gasol stepped it up and Lowry was there. So I don't want to hear any excuses about chemistry and things of that nature with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and they didn't really play with each other, and they just really made each other. I don't want to hear that, because Kawhi Leonard was able to get it done in Toronto, and he wasn't even in his own country, let alone, like I said, he didn't have anybody of his cloth on that team, and he took care of business.
To sustain and win a 7-game tough series. So I think from a coaching standpoint, when I look at Embiid and I look at Simmons, they will be a better fit for Doc Rivers from a coaching standpoint. Simmons measures himself, and he is measured by how many assists and how well he defends and how complimentary he is as a basketball player. And he can dominate a game by being a complimentary player. Embiid is measured on his scoring and rebounding. So their skill sets fit. Now, culturally, and this is a big word, culturally, do they fit culture-wise in terms of their likes, dislikes, understanding of each other on and off the court? There's got to be some chemistry developed between these two young players